Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Back on June 28th of last year, I released a video in which I emphatically stated that Star Wars as a franchise is dead. And I have not changed my views since I said that because it is based solely on factual, verifiable evidence. But before we continue, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please press the red subscribe button to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! Star Wars is a dead franchise because it is no longer self-sustaining. And what do I mean by that? New Star Wars productions are now unable to earn back the money that Lucasfilm and Disney are spending to produce them. And the verifiable evidence that supports my supposition includes the following: the declining box office experienced by the Star Wars sequel trilogy as its movies were released in 2015, 2017, and 2019. And I'll be presenting more about this later on in the video. The first ever complete box office failure of a Star Wars movie in 2018 with the release of Solo: A Star Wars Story, the declining total minutes viewed for multiple Star Wars shows that have been streamed on Disney+, especially the most recent one, Ahsoka, which has the lowest total minutes viewed of all of the streamed Star Wars shows, and for which I released multiple videos talking about it. The permanent closure of the overpriced Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel at Disney World at the end of September of last year, only 18 months after it had first opened. And finally, the ongoing lack of interest in new Star Wars toys, with many of them ending up on the shelves of discount stores like Ollie's, as well as the massive layoffs that occurred at Hasbro in 2023, which still holds the master license from Lucasfilm to produce the toys as a result of its acquisition of Kenner Toys on May 7th, 1991. When I made my declaration that Star Wars is dead, that was only 2 months before the Ahsoka series had premiered on Disney+, but it was after the truly awful third season of The Mandalorian had streamed, as well as being only 2 months after Lucasfilm president and radical feminist Kathleen Kennedy had announced in April that 3 new Star Wars movies were going to be produced. And of those 3 new movies, one is to be directed by the social justice warrior documentarian Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, who is Pakistani-Canadian. If you look at Obaid-Chinoy's history, she won 2 Oscars in 2012 and 2016 for Best Documentary Short Subject. To qualify as a short subject documentary for Oscar consideration, the work, including its credits, has to be under 40 minutes in length, and that's according to the Academy Awards website, Oscars.com. Around 95% of Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's film experience is as a documentary producer and/or director, and the subject matter of her documentaries always focuses predominantly on gender inequality against women. But she never had any formal film education, and she has said that herself.
I'm not sure if all of you know this, but I'm not a trained filmmaker.
But she did attend Smith College, which is a private liberal arts women's college in Northampton, Massachusetts, where she earned a bachelor's degree in economics and government in 2002, which she also talks about in interviews.
I went to Smith College and did my undergraduate and studied economics and political science like a good Pakistani girl.
She later received 2 master's degrees from Stanford University in communication and international policy studies.
I did my graduate studies, but also in international politics, and so I am an accidental filmmaker.
So not only does she describe herself as an accidental filmmaker, the closest thing that she has to an actual education in film is her master's degree in communication, which is not the same thing, but I want to be very clear that I am not criticizing her education. But that education is far more suited to the documentarian film work that she has already been doing, not to works of fiction. And since around 95% or more of her film experience is in directing and producing short nonfiction documentaries, that means that probably less than 5% of her film experience falls within the realm of fictional works. And her fictional work experience does include directing 2 episodes of the failed Disney Plus series Ms. Marvel, which is the closest experience that she currently has to directing anything similar to a Star Wars movie. and she has very little experience directing or producing feature-length films. So if you were to ask the very reasonable question, does Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy have the experience and background necessary to direct a Star Wars movie? My answer would have to be no, she doesn't. But let's be honest. Kathleen Kennedy did not select Obaid-Chinoy to direct a Star Wars movie because of her directorial experience. Kennedy selected Obaid-Chinoy because she is a woman, she's a person of color, and because she is a well-known self-proclaimed feminist activist, which is clearly the only thing that actually matters to Kathleen Kennedy.
I am a storyteller and an activist.
I like to make men uncomfortable.
And my body of work over the last 20 years has been guided by my activism.
I enjoy making men uncomfortable.
And every single piece of work that I've ever created has a piece of activism in it.
Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is a self-proclaimed feminist activist, and her statement in that final clip that I shared, in which she said that every piece of film that she has ever worked on has contained her activism in it, this means that she does not differentiate between works of nonfiction from fictional works. Both will get the same activism treatment, and she said that in May of last year, which was only 1 month after Kathleen Kennedy had announced that she would be directing the new Rey Palpatine movie. And I want to take a moment to thank that Star Wars girl for sharing those video clips on X. Thus, it's very clear why Kathleen Kennedy selected Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. There is no pretending or sidestepping this, even though the trades and shill media sites are now doing their best to try and defend Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy from her own public comments. And what does this mean for Star Wars? Obaid-Chinoy said it herself in the other interview clips that are from 2015. She enjoys making men uncomfortable with her feminist activism. So let's be honest. Does this truly sound like a recipe for a successful theatrical run? Let's take a moment to consider something that is quite often overlooked today. Why did Bob Iger purchase Lucasfilm and Star Wars from George Lucas back in 2012, which was 11 years ago as of the time that I'm recording this video? As written in a 2012 article from The Guardian about the sale to Disney, Bob Iger's motivations were similar to why he had purchased Marvel Studios a few years earlier, for Disney to have content that would appeal to a male audience. Before the acquisition of Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm, most of Disney's content appealed primarily to females. So Iger undoubtedly viewed the purchase of Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm as a way to vastly increase Disney's revenue by pulling in the other 50% of the audience, males. But guess what? From the onset, that was not Kathleen Kennedy's goal. In fact, her goal was the exact opposite to Bob Iger's, because all she wanted to do was to transform Star Wars from a franchise that had always predominantly appealed to a mostly male audience to one that would predominantly appeal to a mostly female audience. And Disney already had that before the acquisitions of Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm. But over the past 11 years, Kathleen Kennedy has done everything that she possibly could to transform George Lucas's work into her own personal propaganda piece to push her radical feminist ideology. Bob Iger purchased Lucasfilm and Star Wars because of the unbridled popularity of its three main male heroes: Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Anakin Skywalker, who was redeemed by Luke. But with the aid of Jar Jar Abrams and Ruin Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy had those three male heroes completely emasculated, retconned, and destroyed because her radical feminist ideology demands the destruction of
the patriarchy.
So what better way to further push her own radical feminist agenda than to hire Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy to inject even more feminist activism into the now dead franchise? As I said at the beginning of the video, Star Wars is dead, and that is due to Kathleen Kennedy's unbridled leadership over Lucasfilm. And all three franchises that were born from the mind of George Lucas, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Willow, have been utterly destroyed by Kathleen Kennedy. But does she care? No, of course not. The only thing that matters to Kathleen Kennedy is her radical feminist ideology, which is no different from how woke identity politics has pretty much destroyed the MCU. which all began after the release of 2019's Avengers Endgame, with MCU's Phase 4, which is more popularly known as the MCU. Both of these franchises once had strong male audiences, but that is no longer the case since both of them were co-opted for political messaging. The only difference between them now is that the MCU isn't quite dead yet, but Star Wars is, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy. Now, if you remember the graph that I showed at the beginning of the video showing the diminishing box office for the 3 Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy movies, their drops in box office are nearly a straight line. So what if I were to use that downward trending straight line to project how well Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's Rey Palpatine movie may do at the box office when it is released in a couple of years? Let's take a look, because when I do, the final global gross box office revenue for her Rey movie may only be around $500 million based on the franchise's current downward trend. Even if I were to add, say, a range of plus or minus $100 million on either side of that projection, even if the movie could earn $600 million globally, that would not be enough to break even if its production budget is more than $250 million, because multiplying that by 2.5 would yield a mid-range estimated break-even point of $625 million. And that's to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. If its total global gross box office earnings end up being as low as $500 million, then the only way it would be able to break even would be if its production budget is no more than $200 million, which would mean that it can't be more than what Disney and Lucasfilm spent to produce Rogue One in 2016. The next cheapest movie to produce was 2017's The Last Jedi at $262 million. So I fully expect that Kathleen Kennedy's and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's upcoming Mary Sue Rey Palpatine movie will more than likely be a box office flop, which would only reinforce my contention that the Star Wars franchise is dead. But since this is a very loosely based projection, I'd love to hear from everyone watching this video regarding what you think may happen. So I have started a community poll that anyone who is subscribed to my channel can vote in. And I have started a similar poll on X. And the question is, how well do you believe the Star Wars Rey movie that feminist, activist, and documentarian Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is directing will perform at the box office when it opens in theaters in 2026? Links to both polls can be found in the description below. I'll do a follow-up video in a few days to talk about the poll results. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.